Welcome to the Green Room, the podcast that bridges the gap between church production and every other aspect of a worship service. From programming directors to worship leaders, volunteers to vendors, tune in for inspiring conversations, expert advice, and a unique look into the intricate puzzle of church production. Here's your host, Aaron Freeman.
Hey, Reid, thanks for joining me. I'd love for you to tell people who you are, what you do, what you have done.
I'll tell you. First of all, I'm Aaron's friend, so that's
true.
important.
Yeah.
My name is Reid Greven. I have been involved in music ministry my whole life. The first time I played piano for a worship service was when I was 12 years old, and that was 36 years ago. And I've played piano for worship services ever since, 36 years. And so grew up in playing a lot of, the worship choruses of the 80s and the 90s, transitioned into the song format, intro, bridge, choruses that we do kind of today and have done for the last 20 years. Went to music school in Nashville, born in Canada, raised in Canada, Southern Ontario. Went to Nashville, went to music school there, married an American, got to stay in America. So I've been here ever since. That was the late 90s. And then we moved from Nashville to Atlanta. My wife's dad, he worked with Kroger. They were transferred down here to Atlanta in the late 90s. And so we followed them down for Easter and Christmas and stuff. We became familiar with Metro Atlanta, and they were attending North Point. So we went a few times even before we moved down from Nashville. When my wife graduated school with her education degree, we ended up moving to Metro Atlanta because that's where a job was available for her. And I was available to essentially drive back to Nashville to meet tour buses, stayed on the road for a good 5 years after college, played music or did merchandise or road management with a lot of CCM folks around that time, late 90s, early 2000s. Some big folks you'd have a chuckle at, especially if you've been around Christian music for more than 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
And then had an opportunity to interview with North Point and eventually came on staff with them, their music department, in January of 2004. So 19 and a half years ago.
Nice. Dang, that's awesome.
Yeah. And was with the music department for 13 and a half years, started kind of as an associate, worked up through, and then the last 4 years there in that role as music director, and got to do a lot of amazing things, spent a lot of time with a lot of amazing people. But after 13 and a half years of doing that, my tank was empty. Winds were blowing a little bit different with some of the administration at that particular campus at that particular time. And fortunately, as I was kind of needing a life preserver, one was thrown to me from our friends over in what was then our media department. Now we call it creative services. And they needed somebody with my skills, with music skills, with production skills. Kind of had a second career blossom there with pre and post production for all of our film stuff, some composition stuff. And so I've been there now since, I guess, 6 or 7 years. And it's my job to, capture content on the front end and then mix, master, repair audio, all the other post production elements for audio on the back end. And that goes out to, so that might be a title package, it might be a short film that we do, it might be a special for Be Rich, but we do a lot of other stuff beyond just Sunday mornings. There are multiple podcasts, and recording those and editing those. We do a lot of curriculum content, capture, refinement, and then distribution. So we do a lot of stuff. We ended up getting to do a lot of stuff in COVID that, everybody had to change directions and change approaches.
You guys were slammed during COVID.
Because everything was essentially now, a short film being put out on a Sunday morning that was recorded, early another time. We were slammed. Yes, absolutely slammed. We learned a lot of stuff. We also learned how to do some stuff more efficiently and more effectively for a lot of our different ministries. And the one that, the big one that comes to mind is our Wumberland, which is our, birth through 5 years. And before COVID, they would have a live storyteller, and hosts. And it was difficult, even when we had a very small number of campuses, for them to get adequate storytellers, folks that could really, memorize the content and then really, sell it to or present it to that age group. And COVID hit. Well, we ended up filming it, and we got really refined. So we narrowed to just a handful of really gifted storytellers. We were able to, bring in animations and other kind of stuff. And, these kids are used to watching YouTube. So as soon as you put something on the screen, they'll just go, and all of a sudden now, post-COVID, we still do that because we're able to replace them trying to find adequate personnel at all these campuses that we've got. And instead, what they can do is just press play. And so for a 7 or 10-minute segment, whatever it happens to be, they're able to present this piece of content that's been refined. It's been edited well. The script is terrific. The animations that support it are great. And the kids end up learning a really valuable lesson at the time through multimedia. And so
they're probably staying more engaged because it's actually probably engaging. Yeah.
So those are a few little things that, we've learned along the way through COVID that we actually ended up keeping and putting budget dollars towards. And they ended up building like a YouTube platform with that. And it just continues to grow and grow and grow. And so now it's the middle of the week. Instead of picking Bluey, you can pick, Upstream or Wumberland. Yeah.
Actually, I need to do that. I'll have to check it out. That's great. And I didn't realize you had been with North Point that long. That's fantastic. Yeah. 19 years. Crazy.
And it's been a while because we've seen so much change and evolution and growth and adaptation to different environments, to different areas of the city, to the way we do ministry. The way we did ministry 19 years ago was so radically different than what we do now in some ways, but also in other ways it hasn't changed and the DNA hasn't changed. So
what are some similarities and differences, speaking with your time as music director or in the music department, from like 2004 music department band on stage to like 2016, when did you leave? 2018 or so?
I think 2016 is when I transitioned off that team. So one thing that is a constant is excellence in musicianship and product, if you will. So much of that comes from Andy himself, and anything that we've noticed, not that he's playing the instrument, but the DNA of any organization, any department, any division, any campus, and then as it funnels up, and then ultimately any organization, the DNA of the leadership of those particular facets will so dictate what's important and what's not important for that particular, group of people or what they're doing. Andy's background was as a musician. So he knows what it's like to sound like when somebody's in tune or what's a good song versus a not so great song, or a singable song, or just a level of, even the mix. I remember years and years ago, he called our buddy Luke Roteman and I back to, he's got a little office backstage, and we thought we were in super trouble, because for doing something that we shouldn't have done. I don't know. You never know, being called to, the principal's office. And he just said, and this was between services, after the first service and before the second service, he said, hey, one of those songs, that piano is really driving that. Let's go ahead and, bring up the level on the piano in that second song, just to help it go through that. I mean, something along the lines of, he noticed something in the mix that he felt there was, warranted some improvement or change, at least, change from what we were doing. And we were like, okay, sounds great. We can do that. So when you've got a leader of the whole organization who that's an area of not only interest, but skill, that's going to be a level of importance. And that, I think, has been a key defining factor in North Point being known for its quality of execution of music, and in turn production, and in turn the quality of the service, the content of the service, the flow of the service. No one's standing around going, okay, what's next? It's all of those things kind of play together when you have an interest in that area and an expertise in that area. So that has not changed, and that continues to this day. I think what has changed is styles. Styles will change and evolve as music evolves. We're not doing the same songs. The church in general, the Big C church globally, is not doing the same songs in the same way that Top 40 radio is not the same as it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So that always continues to evolve and always will continue to evolve. Every once in a while you might do an older song, throw in a Here I Am to Worship, or some early Passion tune, just because you do have, as time goes on, we increase the catalog of which we can draw from for great worship songs. But new songs continue to get written, new styles come in. Here's a great example. I know that you're familiar with this just from a production standpoint. We had a piano and a real Hammond B3 organ on the stage for years and years. It's all, I played it all over our first few live albums. It was a staple, probably played half of the songs that we did on the organ. You maybe start out with the soft part on the piano, the intro over there, maybe a little pad up top, string patch, before main stage. We still had to use, the actual sounds from the physical keyboard. And here we're playing over here. And then the big, rocking chorus comes. We go over here, and now we're rocking out on the organ. So that was pretty staple of a lot of songs, as it would follow the dynamics of the song. And then probably early teens, in 2010, 2000, certainly that by the time we hit 2015, for sure, and maybe even after that, the music would just change. We went into a lot of arpeggiated stuff, or the retro 80s sound came back. We were stylistically, bands like the 1975 were really kind of inspiring a lot of the sonic palette. And so it went pretty hard in that area. And a lot of keyboard players, either if they were younger, they discovered for the first time. If they were a little older like me, they rediscovered the joy of some of the classic 80s synths, the Oberheims, the Prophets, and all the other kind of stuff that made the 80s, and really dove into a lot of that. And there's still some of that elements in some songs. But the B3 was the symbol of a time gone by. It was big, it was heavy, it was occupying a lot of space as we'd move the riser back and forth. It was adding some weight. Visually, it wasn't what was desired at the time. And eventually it got removed, and it sat backstage for like 6 years, 7 years, and taking up space.
I know. Dust. Yeah.
You were there. You probably had many discussions.
Yeah. Are we going to use this thing again? Why are we keeping this thing?
And I was off in a different department by that time, and I'd walk backstage because I'd still function in the building, and just going, oh man, sure hope they don't sell it. Sure hope they keep it up, take care of it, and then sure enough, time marches on, styles change, and tastes change. And the next thing you know, over the last couple of years, the pendulum has swung back to this raw, earthy, who was it? And it was probably Chris Stapleton. It's probably Chris Stapleton's Tennessee whiskey that made all these people go, oh, I like that sound. We should do some church music with that sound. And next thing you know, you got your Cody Carnes and all those folks coming out with the raspy voice and the jangly guitar. And here comes the B3 organ again. And, so the pendulum always is moving. It's always shifting. Styles change. Tastes of the people that are involved change. We've seen that. And so that's probably one thing, that's obviously changed. It's also another really tough thing to go, ooh, we have a brand new person in our department or leading this particular campus or whatever the case is, and their taste and their style is so different than our existing body of personnel or our, current capability from personnel, either on staff or contractors or the people that are leading worship or whatever the case is. So those are the big pendulum changes that are usually the toughest to navigate.
And I think quickly back to the B3 thing, I just saw, Elevations touring with one.
Yeah.
They were showing like the backstage view of the B3 doing its thing, whirling around. And I was like, oh, that looks very familiar.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy.
Our buddy Justin, he's out with Crowder, he out with the B3 there, and it's
nice. Yeah. It's making us come back.
There's something, isn't it crazy how the organic stuff, the acoustic guitar, a real piano, or the Hammond organ, real drums, yes. even just a kind of a classic guitar sound, not the chorus of the 80s but it's just like that stuff is kind of timeless and will span generations.
I also think we may have just hit the synth way too hard. Like it was just like every Christian song was just like that. You start with like the whatever. I'm like, is there not a Christian song right now without this? Because it's every one of them. And I think you're right. Just the sort of back to the basics. Like we don't need all this over processed stuff. But who knows? In 5 years, it might be back.
Well, again, the pendulum is over here, and sure enough, it'll come back. Mm-hmm. And I sometimes think it's we live in a crazy time musically that is really the most. It's the weirdest menagerie that we've ever had in the history of time. And here's so I'll give an example.
Like music, all music.
And so here's my example. The farther back in time we go, and I'm talking hundreds and hundreds, even thousands of years, the rate of change was incredibly slow. You've got your Benedictine monks for centuries, and then you finally enter into Baroque music, and that hangs around for a couple of hundred years, and then the pendulum eventually swings over to the classical time, and then you move into the Romantic period, and those three genres essentially span like 300, 400 years, multi-generational, and then you hit the 20th century, and things start moving a little quicker. Technology and the radio and people hearing other stuff. Because remember, people didn't get to hear stuff live unless they went to a live performance or they read sheet music and were able to play a piano or in their home, or maybe some guitars, but for most parts that's how music was heard. And then you get into the 20s, more and more stuff happening, people going out, hearing more live bands. Improvisation starts really, really happening in the 20th century as opposed to written sheet music. So instead of everybody going, oh, I need a printing press and to read the sheet music, you're getting into, oh, we now have this, we're swinging and stuff. That really hits a peak in the 50s with bebop music, and jazz, and post-war stuff. And then from about the 50s for the next 10 or 50 years, you almost look like at a decade swing. 50s music is really defined by a sound palette. 60s music, you start with a whole different sound palette. As the British invasion happens, And then by the end of that, you're looking at Woodstock and all the the Janis Joplins and the Jimi Hendrix and all the stuff coming out of that, the Doors. So you in a matter of 10 years, you've gone from pretty tight, bow ties to psychedelic rock. Then the 70s comes in and you have this whole sweep of yacht rock and other stuff that's happened and other great bands happening. And then the 80s is a complete pendulum shift away from that, with where punk rock takes over, and then the synthesizers.
Yeah.
And we have a decade of really refined, polished, quantized 80s rock and pop, all that Michael Jackson stuff. And it starts out, it's great, and then it just gets old by the end of the decade. And then by the end of the decade, well, here who comes? Nirvana, which is the antithesis of the previous decade.
Huh. Yeah.
Even Jars of Clay coming in with an acoustic guitar and a lo-fi loop. Well, that was the antithesis of all Christian music from the 1980s. So even in our world, Christian world, that happened too. So that pushes back. And then you have the 90s, which is not my favorite decade of music, where it's a whole lot of angst and lack of refinement in musicianship. And it's blah, blah, blah. And then the 2000s hits, and you're getting into your boy bands, and you hit that almost like, no, we need quantized stuff. We need a little form, a little more polish, a little more production value. And then it keeps going like this. And the more we have, and that's when, Napster comes in, and all of a sudden people don't have to go and spend $15 on a CD. They're now downloading stuff and hearing music from other sides of the country and other parts of the world. And in the last 20 years, it all just goes like this. And now on your playlist, you've got Dua Lipa and Adele, who are completely different stylistically, but it's completely acceptable for you to listen to.
Yeah. I mean,
so think about what, you're listening to, and your Chris Stapletons. You've got your rock star guy, the guy on YouTube who's like singing out in West Virginia right now, hit number 1 on iTunes.
Well, yeah, he just hit number 1 on the top Billboard 100. Yeah.
So again, everybody with a computer making music, with quantizes and working on EQs and waveforms is going, because here's a dude with a resonator and one mic changing the world. So
would you say that's the same? That's the same thing that happened with Christian music too. Just the pendulum kept going back and forth, or
yeah.
I mean, worship music right now. Not that it all sounds the same, but it's definitely not like you're saying, Dua Lipa versus Adele. But
I don't think Christian music changes as fast, because I don't think Christian music is as cutting edge. And this may be, I don't know if anybody's going to find this controversial. I think Christian music is, and almost has always been, reactionary.
Yes, I've felt that too. 100%, 100%. Yep.
So if something is hitting in culture, give it a few weeks, we'll be doing something similar in church.
Yeah.
And
it's bugged me, but then what are you going to do? I don't write the music. I can't write the music. So
yeah, it's tough. And here's where it all kind of boils down to, where you're never going to satisfy everybody in your audience. We're inviting, just think about it for a minute. You are a fan of an artist. You're a fan of the artist, and maybe your friend is not. No big deal. You go to that person's concert because you like that person's music. Your friend does not. But you're still friends. And then all of a sudden you say, oh, let's go worship our God together at this church. And they're going to do music that you might like and your friend does not.
That's, yeah.
Remember, we're back in now, we're into like style and taste. And so and then terrestrial Christian radio is a whole other element. We'll talk about in a second. where you're now having to essentially appease the lowest common denominator. So I wish we did more X. I wish we did more Y. And then people like me are in the middle going, how about Z? Will Z kind of work? Maybe,
Right. Yeah.
Hoping that it does. And now some churches, you will go real hardcore stylistically and attract folks that are drawn to that stylistically, whether it's a look or a feel or a style or a theologic, motivating, but like really charismatic or that kind of stuff.
Right.
And that is a trend or a fad for a time that can have a lot of success for that time, but that's more or less following an artist, not necessarily belonging to and being part of a church and a local body. That kind of ends up being two kind of different things. What is the tail wagging the dog? Is the music bringing them in and then, oh yeah, we have some kids services? Or, hey, is this a place where your whole family can thrive? This happens to be the music that we're doing this week. Hope that, is impactful as well. So that's kind of the tough burden, where the bigger the church, the tougher it is to please everybody. So here's an anecdote. So I was getting ready for bed on a Sunday night, and we have two sinks, and I'm brushing my teeth at my sink. My wife's over at her sink, and she says to me, out of the blue, completely out of the blue, hey, who picked that new song that we did today? And I said, I did. She goes, yeah, don't ever do that one again. That was bad. That was a bad song. That song was horrible. And in that moment, and I've told that story 100 times, and because in that moment, I realized that if two people who can agree on being married to each other and agree on paint colors for the house and agree on children's names and agree on when and where they're going to take vacations and what they're having for dinner, still are going to have wildly different opinions on music, there's no hope ever of appeasing everybody that's out there. So if you're going to default, and that's what I kind of learned, so if you're going to default on something that is singable for the audience, that is obviously theologically correct, and I think we can just assume that one. But it also, gave realization of sometimes the more simple stuff that we do is the most effective for the most people. All right. And so that's why it's like good songs, cherish them. You're going to have to introduce some other stuff at some point and see if that, throw it against the wall and see if it sticks. And you will do some trial and error. But ultimately, just if you find a good song, cherish it, and don't overuse it though, so you can cherish it for a long time.
What's overuse for you? Like every week, every 2 weeks, every like.
So that's a very interesting question, because we did the math on this one week. We did because somebody was saying, "Oh, it feels like we do that song all the time," and to them, it did feel like we did it all the time, because in their hearing of it, it was all the time. So we figured out that we were doing about let's count them up. So somebody would probably do 2 or 3 times of through a personal preparation before a rehearsal. At the rehearsal, we'd go over it at least twice. And then on a Sunday morning, you would do it again. You're probably going through it again, Friday, Saturday, getting ready for the service. Sunday morning, we're doing a band work through, and then a full production run through. And then we were doing a 9 o'clock service and an 11 o'clock service. And then if you have any other services, that would add on to that. So already you're at 9 to 1. And if it, let's call it 10 to 1, because you're probably going through it more than a couple times before you get to rehearsal. So if we're looking at a 10 to 1 ratio, you're going to get burnt out of a song long before the person coming to the building does. Now, let's take that 10-to-1 ratio and add in some additional data. And the data that we had was that half of the people were coming to church 50% of the time. They were coming 2 out of every 4 weeks. Okay, so whether it's kids sports or vacations or mother-in-law's in town or whatever it was, we could prove through check-in of kids, that kind of like that kind of actual, like, we know that this family is here 50% of the time. That was the average. So if you say we've got folks coming an average of twice a month, well, guess what? If you did that song, they didn't even get to hear that. That was 10 times of you doing it without them hearing it. So the ratio now between production or musician to attendee is almost 20-to-1. So you end up going, man, no wonder they're just staring at the screens. They don't know the content.
Yeah, of production, we don't feel it as much as, because we're not doing the personal prep, not always at midweek rehearsal. So we're really only hearing it Sundays. And if you're prepping lyrics or something, you're listening to it again. But yeah, that's crazy. 20. Yeah.
So imagine if you're just production and you're hearing the band run through, the full production run through, and 2 services. So that's a 4-to-1 ratio. Excuse me. And then so the people coming, that's a 8-to-1 ratio. And then the fewer songs that you do, the more importance they've got to have, because it's, we're hanging our hat on a smaller amount of content. But then if you miss a week, you miss that song. And then if you come back the next week, it's like, hey, why are we doing all new songs? Oh no, we did that one last week.
That's, right.
So we're still learning that one. So it's tough. There's no perfect.
That's it. There's probably not a right answer.
There's not a right answer, because even if you did a big old spreadsheet and you said, okay, here's where we have all of our current, A songs or number one songs, and then a secondary ring and a tertiary ring. And we have all this, and then we want to create flow with song keys, and we want to create flow with song themes. And we think we have all this, thing perfect when we're lining it up. Well, now we got to make sure that we've got the right leaders to be able to do this justice, to do this song justice. Do we have the right leaders that are going to be able to do this song? Do you have 2 wonderful balladeers and you're trying to do a pep, hype, up-tempo song? Well, that ain't going to work. Or conversely, are you trying to do a ballad with the hype pep up guy who doesn't actually really have that great a vocal range? So you're looking at so many factors. You're looking at style. You're looking at taste of the people that are making decisions. You have the personnel that are having to execute the material, aka the band, worship leaders. Create a flow from key to key that makes sense, where the singers and the audience, it's going to work for them. I'll balance that with, have we overdone this? Have we underdone it? We want to do this. We want to do that. It's a tough thing to do every week. So there was a science where we were literally just sit down and just spend deep time, deep work time on, does this work? What if we do this? Can this person execute that? Oh, wait a minute. We had this person sing this song the last 3 times they were here.
Right. Yeah.
And so you want to avoid them from feeling like, oh, this is my token song. I do this song. But no, you're a valued worship leader. You can lead, just about anything, or just happens to be that, so you're balancing egos. And at that point, it's this giant balance between all those other factors. Ego, gosh, that's a whole other crazy thing. Why is she leading 2 songs and I'm only leading 1? And, all the other stuff that goes with it. So I'm convinced that the music director at a church has the hardest job. Because if a lead pastor isn't doing his job very well, people just leave and go to a different church. You never really hear about it. But a music pastor hears about it from his superiors or her superiors, and from all the other people coming up, and all the musicians, and everybody's got an opinion. Nobody's driving home on a Sunday with their spouse going, "Can you believe that group's curriculum?" No offense to our group's friends.
Yeah.
But they're going, "Oh, I didn't like that singer," or, "Oh, I love that singer," or, "I didn't like that song," or, "I love that song,"
Yeah, that's true.
So all that to say, go give your music people a hug. They need it.
Yeah. Yes.
Once you've decided all of that and you have a successful week, guess what happens in 7.5 days?
Sunday's coming again.
Yep. You got to do it all over again.
Well, not Sunday. Do you get Tuesday rehearsal, or whenever, if you have a midweek rehearsal?
Yeah.
It's quicker. Yeah.
It's relentless. And the weeks just become a haze, and the months just become a haze, and the years just become a haze. So it's tough. It's a tough gig.
I'd love to hear like your thoughts on the production and band relationship on like a Sunday morning. I know that every church is going to be different in that, in like rehearsal, full rehearsal, those kind of things. I know for North Point churches, generally we have a full Q to Q rehearsal or run through. We call it run through on Sunday morning. What's the band's perspective, musicians' perspective on that? Because generally, I know we've said it out loud, like that Sunday morning thing is for like the programming team and production. It's not particularly for band. Is that, how does it feel for the band? Or is it like understood and like the band's like, great, let's make this as best as we can?
So in environments or churches that I've been at, so the last 6 years, I've been able to spend my Sundays at a variety of places as a musician, with different levels of influence or input into the morning's content. There's a lot of churches out there, probably a lot listening, that do not have a midweek rehearsal. So everything happens on a Sunday morning.
Is that more the norm, you would say?
I would say
exception?
That's probably the norm. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially in a smaller church.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So you have, so that run through they're thankful for that, because that's another time to kind of work out the kinks in the song. So it's usually not a problem or problematic in those specific environments. If anything, it's welcomed. Hey, that was good. Let's do X, Y, or this, or let's make sure we think about this when we go through the run through. Cool, got it, capiche. The downside of that, I think, that some of the musicianship ends up suffering. Some of the really refining excellence in parts, specifically vocals.
How so?
Parts, just like refining harmonies. Hey, what are you doing here? Hey, what are you doing here? I'm coming in there. Let's work on this part. Hey, what's your rhythm structure here? With syllables and stuff. So much of that in a North Point world is worked out on a Tuesday night or Wednesday night, or whenever there's a midweek rehearsal. So, and then after the rehearsal, everybody would leave with some homework. So in the North Point world, or the midweek rehearsal world, the band has the opportunity and the ability to go ahead and do a lot of the heavy chipping away. Really, really, starting to make this piece of marble look like a pretty statue, and then leave rehearsal, and over the next few days, privately, really sand off some of the edges so that they're able to come in on Sunday morning. So that's where I know this mindset of the band going, don't bother us with all these rehearsals, we still have to do 2 full services or 3 full services. And so that's where I know can be a tension. So the first thing is clarity and vision. And that comes from the music director himself. He can't be, or herself, sorry. They can't be a nagger along with the band. They have to straddle the giant chasm between the band, what's best for them, what's going to keep them motivated, what's going to keep them at their best, yet also all that same thing for production. So you've kind of got to be yes, I understand how this is confusing or frustrating for you, but here's why, here's why, here's why, here's why, here's why. And you'll sound like a broken record. But again, most places don't have the exact same personnel every week. So it's going to be new information for them. And when that folks do come back in a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, it's a reminder for them. So it's hey guys, I know this is going to be tough. So let's pace ourselves. Here's a couple of things that are non-negotiables though. We need to make sure that we're not goofing around, that we're playing the legit arrangements, so that we can make sure that whoever's doing pro presenter has a rehearsal and is making sure, because they're there to set you up for your success. Camera shots, all the stuff that's important. Hey, remember, there's so many people that are getting to enjoy you or you're ministering to that aren't going to be in the room because they live in a different country or they're just not be able to hear today. So we want to make sure that our camera shots are terrific. And this is why we do it, is that so that you can have ministry and impact on folks that aren't here. And then, hey, vocals, I know it's going to be a bother, but let's go ahead and make sure that we're singing full voice so that we can make sure that the front of house gets what they need to make sure that they're mixing at the best of their ability. Again, so that you can come across the best, so that you can minister the best and you can put your best foot forward. So those are the kind of things where you just kind of end up needing to be that inspiration and that reminder and hey, I know, but here's why.
Yeah, that's great.
Now, conversely, I would stand in some of those situations and go, okay, here's a few things that are superfluous that we don't need to do, that is really not helping anybody, or that could be done at a different time in a different manner without taxing the band and specifically the singers. Let's make sure that the pro presenter person has a recording of the rehearsal from midweek, and let's cast vision to them, just like we cast all that vision to the band. We need to cast vision to the video director, the pro presenter person, about spending some private practice and rehearsal time on their own so that they're not coming in cold on a Sunday morning. Because it's tough enough to do a full song run through and then a full production run through. We don't want to have to go back and do something a third time. Those kind of elements definitely help.
Well, and just having the midweek rehearsal period, I mean, I'm a fan. It helps with all aspects of programming the service. Like, hey, that worked, that didn't work, that's not really going to fit.
Yeah.
To making sure the lyrics are good, to, if you have the ability to virtual sound check it from the house, you can have a mix dialed in, 70-85%. And then Sunday morning, you're fine tuning that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And from a
I know
creative
that's not
standpoint,
going to be for everybody, but
yeah, from a creative standpoint, there were a lot of times where we would have to send out an email after rehearsal going, hey, based on yesterday's rehearsal, we're either going to refine these few things, or we're going to drop something, or we're just going to go in a different direction. Now, it was very rare that we would do anything that was a radical change, like drop a song or change a song. Hopefully we've done all of our due diligence long before rehearsal, but we might tweak an arrangement. One of the things I always realize is like, hey, you know what? On paper, that sounded pretty good, but now that we've gone through it, we need to, let's do a couple of things, So here's an example. Hey, these are 2 great songs. But when these two songs are back to back, it's literally just 10 straight minutes of 98 decibels pounding at the audience with no break and no breather. And we need to change that. So maybe we do a change a verse to a different form of instrumentation or something to kind of do that. Now, hopefully, if we've spent good, deep time on the front end, we see those red flags coming before we get there. So if that means sitting down and, okay, here's the 3 songs that we have an idea of doing. Let's go ahead and let's listen through these. Let's go ahead and listen through these. Yeah, that works. How about this? Yeah, that works. How about this? Ooh, here's a red flag here. Ooh, let's make sure that we do, really strip down this verse and first chorus so that this can be our chance to have a breather, sonic breather, really let the audience sing, hear themselves sing. Because when an audience hears themselves sing, they participate so much more. And that's really, I think, the best thing that you can do to turn a service into observatory to participatory is having those familiar sections, like a down chorus or something like that, where the band really backs off, the audience really gets to hear themselves sing, and we become a big unified choir. So purposely building those into sets, where can we make sure that we have that? And there's so much sonic energy coming out of those PAs that it's fun and inspiring to listen to that song on your laptop speakers or in your car. But when you're in the room and you've got 95 decibels pound or 100 decibels just pounding you, there's a time after about 5 minutes where you just I need a breather. I need a breather.
Right.
And that helps shape the emotional dynamics of worship sets. So those few things. So we would either work that out in rehearsal midweek or in listening through back after rehearsal, make those few little adjustments.
That's great. I want to touch base on what you just said about like hearing the audience sing. Are you more talking about like the audience as a whole versus like the individual hearing themselves sing? Because or is that shifted? Because there has been sort of at least maybe it was a trend of like where like people didn't want to hear themselves sing. So the PA was a little bit louder. And so that it sort of took away the vulnerability of just hearing yourself sing. I know what you're saying, and I know that there are varying opinions on that. There's power in the fullness of a mix. Okay. All right. I mean, that's not lost on anybody. Hearing your own self sing for a whole song set. Again, differing opinions. If you have a musical background or are musical in nature or just like to sing, then when it's too loud, that can be frustrating to you and really take you out of the moment. But conversely, if your natural wiring is to go, I'm very aware of my voice. I'm not familiar with that. And you don't want to hear yourself sing, and you surely don't want anybody else to hear yourself sing. That can be an issue too. However, there's something special, magical, something spiritually magical happens when a whole congregation is singing and hears the rest of the congregation. And I'm not talking about like the 3 people around them, because the PA soft. I mean, a down part, there's no drums, back way off, maybe it's just piano or a simple acoustic driving it. The singer's back off a mic, and the room literally hears itself. I'm convinced there's something that happens in our spirits that says we are joining together as a unified body, glorifying our Heavenly Father in a similar way to the way that we've read that the angels and saints are singing and praising them in the heavens. And you don't have to know a harmony, and you don't have to be self-conscious about your voice, because all of a sudden you're all doing it simultaneously. It all happens together.
we've been to concerts where, Bon Jovi, oh, we're halfway there. And then he puts the mic out and the whole crowd goes, whoa, heaven on a prayer. I mean, you're in that realm. Bryan Adams on his live record, and oddly enough, Andy was playing this for us at a video taping a couple months ago. And he's like, guys, listen to this. And I was there, and there's about just a handful of us. And he's on his iPhone. And it's I think the last track of Bryan Adams live, and it's the song Heaven. And, so the intro starts out like you're familiar, and you can hear it's a live performance. And then the top of the verse, and Bryan doesn't sing, but you hear the thousands of people in the crowd sing the song, like the whole verse. And they all know the words, and they're all singing loud at the top of their lungs. And even just hearing it on a phone, it was magical. It was a spiritual experience hearing that. And we were all just like, tears kind of welling up, and familiar song. Here's the key: familiar song. So you're not asking the audience to sing and hanging them out on a ledge where they don't know the material, or it's rhythmically difficult. Okay, we're not doing that in a section that's difficult or challenging or unfamiliar. We're asking them to do that, or giving them the opportunity to do that in a place where they feel comfortable and they're willing to and it's usually a fairly emotional section of the song as well. So like a down chorus, or even the first verse and chorus of a really familiar song that they know is impactful.
Well, I always think of Silent Night at Christmas. That's always like
perfect example.
You always
perfect example.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Worship leader could go Silent Night, back off. And as long as the audience has a melody and tempo structure, they've got to have, somebody driving the tempo as well. Some of the piano or a guitar or something like that, so that this doesn't become the Wild West. Then it happens. It's so special. We hear it at concerts, and in certain environments, certain worship environments that I've been able to be a part of over the last few years, we've been able to really make that a priority. And what it's done, I believe, has increased the culture of worship in the organization as a whole, as well as really just be a very special and impactful time during a service, where you have a whole room that's participating as one big choir, and not a handful of people on stage performing for an audience.
Right. Yeah, I love those moments when I'm actually in the audience, which is rare these days. But I stop singing, and because I want to listen to that rather than be a part of it, because it's just like you were saying, it's just like we're all together doing one thing for our Heavenly Father, and it's amazing. Yeah. However, conversely to that, if you were able to go to the Taylor Swift concert, it was a miserable experience because you couldn't hear her singing it. It was the whole stadium singing, and it was like, I don't need her. I don't need her in my ear the whole concert. But it was still kind of funny. Yes. I mean, those people. I thought I was a Swiftie, and no, I shouldn't say that. I didn't think that. I thought I knew some of her music until I went to that concert, and I was like, oh, I think I know about 5 songs. And she did like 40 songs. Anyway. Yeah, so it can be a rewarding experience, or it can be an annoying experience. Okay, so before we started recording, we were talking about like breakfast on Sunday mornings. Yes. And knowing you've been at different churches and stuff like that, I find it very important that we provide our volunteers, our production volunteers, people that are with us the entire morning, the band, that there's like good food. And I know you've got some hot takes on that.
So One of the things that in the early days of North Point, we had a lot of before you could make a living as a professional worship musician. Most of our musicians also played in corporate bands or other stuff around town, and so many of them, especially their first time with us, in awe and amazement of the level of hospitality that was being provided. And this already existed by the time I came on staff. And the fact that they were able to load in, or somebody would help them load in. We had incredible facility for them to be a part of and gear to use. They were treated with an incredible amount of respect because of the ability of their craft. And then they were fed, because we found out, I was like, why is this so special? He's like, bro, because most of our gigs, we have to load in through the kitchen. If it's somebody fancy there, you can't look at them, talk to them. There's no food ever. So you got to eat before you come, or you're starving, or, go to Waffle House afterwards. Or it was just the life of a gigging musician is tough. And this was actually really kind of birthed by the guy that hired me, Bill DeLoach, who was a gigging musician, got saved, and then eventually was working at North Point. And so his heart was to go, I've been in their shoes. I know what it's like. I want to make sure that this is a completely different experience, because we have the reputation of the church on the line and God on the line. So we want to make sure that we are viewed, our organization is viewed, and ultimately our Heavenly Father is viewed in a favorable light, and not what they are experiencing, on a Friday night or a Saturday night at a gig. So that's why making sure that we gave them, a great dinner at rehearsal, midweek rehearsal, and then a good breakfast on Sunday mornings. A balanced breakfast, not just a spattering of, a couple donuts or a granola bar. Growing up, I'd see my parents having to scarf down food before we went to church, and they were in the choir. And the only thing that they had to sustain them for all the hours they were there in the morning were some, I grew up in Canada, so there were Timbits, so Tim Hortons little tiny Timbit donuts.
Okay.
Like a Dunkin' Donut munchkin.
Donut hole? Yeah, kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah. So a donut hole and a gallon of percolated coffee. And that's basically what the choir, sustained themselves on until, the preacher was done, pontificating at 12:30 or 1:00. So seeing that coming in, and then in the last few years, even just being at some different organizations and not seeing that same level of importance or hospitality or just purposefulness of making sure that the people that are there for like 8 hours, like you said, I mean, we're there sometime between 5:30, 6:30 in the morning, certainly for audio or production guys, all the way until usually about 12:30. So that's like a full day's of work. So making sure, and we don't have a chance to go out and get lunch between services. So making sure that the band is fed, that has a balanced diet. And I know that, the carbohydrate stuff, your bagels or your donuts or, that kind of stuff is easy to throw at. And, if you've got a volunteer that's helping for a kids class that's, staying for an extra hour, and they're there a total of 3 hours in the morning, donuts fine, bagels fine, no worries. I'm talking about the folks like us that are there all morning. And there's just a different level that your body needs as far as what helps make your synapses fire. Getting some protein in there, something hot in there, some kind of balanced meal that helps you and your body and all of your biologic functions work right. So, it's good fuel in, so that you can go on stage or to your production position and do your best, so that you are able to do your best. Because, like I said, ultimately the reputation of the church and our Heavenly Father is is what they're out there to represent. It's the stuff that's on the line. So, football team, they're not throwing a bagel at their linebackers before they go out and play a game. So that's kind of the thing. It's like, so if you're gonna sacrifice on your budget somewhere, do it in your realm of hospitality. It may seem like it's not a big deal or it's not important, but I promise you it is. I promise you it is. It makes a difference, and it helps set almost a reputation for your organization for the people that are participating.
Well, even like your volunteer reputation, like within the church, like production or, main service, like we got full breakfast.
Yeah.
You should come over here and serve with us. Like if you're looking to recruit, that might be a little bit of a incentive to do that. But yes, I see what you mean.
It tells a volunteer, it tells a band person, it tells a singer that's maybe debating what organization they say yes to on Planning Center. It helps put your best foot forward and lets them know that they are valued and that they are important and that their needs as a person are attempting to be met by this organization.
Oh, that's really good. I've been on both sides, I've been at North Point and I've worked at other churches where there's nothing and not even sort of the willingness. I don't think it's anything, like mean.
It's not nefarious.
It's just, they're not even thinking about it. And so just budget money is just not even going that way. I definitely think that, I think just with anything, any business or whatever, treat your people well, and they're going to be coming back. And I mean, I know for North Point, you've been there for 20 years. We've got some production guys and ladies that have been serving on the production team for 20 years, day one, kind of, and a lot of the guys have been there for 10, 15 years and are really good at what they do. And, the way we treat them is how we keep them. And that North Point has really done a really good job of that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. People will want to return and be and participate where they know they are valued.
Absolutely.
And how you show that value can be just as simple as providing a great meal.
Yep, solid. And Waffle House never seems to disappoint if you're in the South.
This is true.
Well, it sounds like you don't like Waffle House.
I do like Waffle House. I just don't want to have to wait and go there afterwards.
Well, I mean, like catered in. You have it in the green room on Sundays.
Oh no, that's great.
Okay.
I think I'm talking to folks where like, oh yeah, we've got some granola bars over there.
Oh right.
It's like that granola bar or that
Good.
that bagel is that's not gonna keep this motor running for the 8 hours that you need it to run.
Right. There's only so many bagels I can eat. Exactly. And only so many little fig bars from Costco that I can eat too. Appreciate it.
This is true.
Reid, thanks so much. This has been great. I think
my pleasure,
we have
Aaron.
plenty to talk about, so we should save some for next time.
Yes.
I'd love to have you back. That's awesome.
Oh, my pleasure.